don't have cancer, but I want to reduce my risk of getting it in the future. I wonder if you could share some of your top tips for people as to what they can actually practically do.
Well, I think exercise is absolutely essential. Because bringing oxygen into your blood, having good blood flow, increases physiological function. If you can reduce the amounts of high carbohydrate foods that you eat with exercise, and occasionally look at your GKI, your glucose ketone index, you're going to ward off not only cancer, but probably type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and even dementia. So all of these things are linked to a common problem in disturbed metabolic homeostasis. So I think there are definitely things people can do. And it's hard when you're sitting in traffic jams, and then you have to rush up and sit in front of your computer or in an office somewhere. So all of these things are not consistent with our evolutionary origins. But I think if people become aware of these things, at least they can, in their own lives, try to adjust their situation to recognize this.
And sleep, chronic stress, these sort of things.
Well, that's another thing too. Sleeping, good sleep. Yeah, right. Who wouldn't like to have that? Stress. What do you do for stress? We're all stressed out. People used to smoke like crazy to reduce stress. Now they stopped smoking, and now they got fat, and now they're back in the same spot for a different reason.
Yeah.
So it's just.
But the point is that all of these things really do make a real difference at reducing your risk of cancer in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe this is just a little teaser for the next time we talk. You mentioned earlier on that intermittent hypoxia is one of the things that can drive the mitochondrial dysfunction. I wanted to really explain what you meant by that. Did you mean obstructive sleep apnea, things like that? Because you then mentioned exercise as being a way of delivering more oxygen.
Right. No, that's what Warburg even showed, that it was intermittent hypoxia that he thought was responsible for the majority of cancers. We've expanded upon that, and we've shown the mechanisms by which that can happen. So, yeah, that's another story. I mean, we've done a lot of research, and we recognize these things. And intermittent hypoxia can be prevented by oxygenation and exercise and eating the right foods. So again, you're coming back to a similar. And they rubbed carcinogen. 20-methylcalanthrene is a known carcinogen, and they rubbed it on the arms of these monkeys for 10 years, inject them with it and everything else. And they didn't get a single case of cancer from these. And they concluded that, these monkeys are not good models for cancer. But the monkeys were eating their diet. They were living in their natural environment. And they were quite resistant. The alternative experiment, which was never done, is why don't we give these monkeys high carbohydrate diets, really change their diet and lifestyle, and then do these kinds of experiments. And I think that members of our ancestral groups having the correct exercise, diet, and lifestyle, even when exposed to carcinogens, would have a much lower risk.
Yeah.
So when you take folks that are now not exercising, getting obese, you have them exposed to a variety of chemicals within the food systems, the type of poor nutrition. I think even though we have a lot of resistance in our body to cancer, we're really bashing down those walls of resistance by the diet and lifestyles that we're taking.
Yeah. I really like that example because I think it goes beyond cancer for me into all these chronic diseases. We can scare ourselves these days if we go online, if we read about the toxins, the pollutants, the air pollution, the diesel fumes, it can be really, really scary to think, well, what can I do? I'm going to be exposed to so much of this. But what you just explained there is really the approach I take with myself and with my patients, which is very much, okay, well, what can you do? Okay, what are the things you have control over? What can you do in your own house? And the more good things you can do, the more of a buffer you create, the more strong these foundations become to then resist the attack and the onslaught from the modern worlds. As someone who's been studying cancer for decades now, do you think that's a kind of fair analogy?
Oh, I think it's a really good analogy. I think, but it's hard,
It is hard.
We are confronted now with food sources in abundance, our exercise levels are far, far lower than they were when we evolved as a species. This whole way we live, sitting in traffic, in front of computers, with minimal exercise, chowing down on poorly nutritious, high carbohydrate foods. I mean, over years, little kids can do this because your body is strong and healthy. But man, you do that for 30 years, and it just it crushes you down.
Yeah. Potential benefits of ketones in neurodegenerative disease, in Alzheimer's, in mental illness, in cancer, of course, in weight loss. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that how can this one fuel source, or potentially this one diet, ketosis, and of course, there's many ways to get into nutritional ketosis, but it's very interesting to me how this could potentially have a wide variety of different benefits for a wide variety of seemingly different conditions. Now, let's look at this methodically.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, okay, let's go back to our Paleolithic ancestors. All right. So for thousands and thousands of years, we were in a state of ketosis, mainly because food was not available. Carbohydrates were certainly very limited to seasonal situations. So our ancestors, we were always in a state of therapeutic ketosis. We know that in the aboriginal populations, not only was cancer rare, diabetes was rare, cardiovascular disease was rare, Alzheimer's was never heard of, or rarely discussed, or rarely identified. As some, all of these things that we see that you just mentioned are linked to mitochondrial function. So ketones, as I said, as my late good friend Richard Veitch from the National NIH, ketones are a super fuel. They allow the health and vitality of our mitochondria. They allow our mitochondria to remain very, very healthy. So when you talk about all of these different linkages for all these different diseases, they all comes back to energy metabolism. And we didn't have all of these chronic diseases when we were existing in the Paleolithic period. We had other things that would kill us, like infections, bacterial infection. We didn't have antibiotics, falls, arthritis. You would have a variety of things that would limit your capability of longer-term survival. But cancer, dementia, cardiovascular disease, all of these kinds of things were not there.
Yeah.
So, or very, very rare. So when you say ketogenic diet, it's actually, you got to be very careful, because it's not necessarily a ketogenic diet. It's the state of being in therapeutic ketosis. So the solution to the cancer problem is simultaneously targeting the fermentation metabolism of the cells, which is the glucose and glutamine, but by transitioning the body over to ketone bodies, which allows the normal cells in the brain and all of the organs to function, and fatty acids for the liver. Tumor cells can't use fatty acids and ketone bodies. So the solution to the cancer problem is very simple. You have to simultaneously target the fermentation while transitioning the body over to fuels that cannot be fermented. And this now puts massive pressure and kills the tumor cells without toxicity.
Wow. I mean, it's so clear when you say it like that, because look, if you were not medical, right? If you knew nothing about cancer and the pathophysiology, but you knew that, hey, listen, a cancer cell cannot use oxygen. Even if oxygen is around, it doesn't use oxygen to generate energy. It can only use glucose and glutamine, right? If that's all you knew, you told a child that, I reckon a child would say, okay, well, let's not give the body any more glucose or glutamine. If that's what a cancer cell feeds on, let's stop it, right? Now, that may be overly simplistic, but it kind of sounds like that's the conclusion from what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I think you can't stop the glutamine because it's a non-essential amino acid, and It's the most abundant amino acid in
Yeah.
our body. It plays a massively important role in our gut, our immune system, the urea cycle. So glutamine is they call it a non-essential amino acid, but for cancer, it's an absolutely essential amino acid. You can use diet and lifestyle to lower blood sugar for sure, but you need drugs that will interrupt the glutamine pathway, the glutaminolysis pathway, essentially. So we use a combination of diet and repurposed drugs in what we developed called the press pulse therapeutic strategy for managing cancer, where we bring the body into a state of very low glucose, high ketones, and then we hit the surviving tumor cells with drugs that can target and disrupt the glutamine pathway. But we do it we pulse it